The hidden war, at America's doorstep, refers to the largely invisible yet devastating conflict being waged by Mexican drug cartels that extends far beyond the border, penetrating deep into American communities while remaining largely out of the public consciousness. This isn't a war with front lines or uniformed soldiers, but rather a sophisticated criminal enterprise that operates in shadows, affecting millions of Americans who have no idea they're living in a battle zone. The significance of understanding this hidden war cannot be overstated, because while Americans debate immigration and border security in abstract political terms, the cartels are already here, operating distribution networks in every state, fueling addiction crises and destroying families from within. Consider Phoenix, Arizona, where the city became known as the kidnapping capital of America in the late 2000s, second only to Mexico City worldwide. Cartel operatives were snatching people off suburban streets in broad daylight, holding them in drop houses mere miles from shopping centers and schools. Or look at the small town of Columbus, New Mexico, where the entire police force was eventually arrested for running guns to the Juarez cartel, demonstrating how corruption can hollow out American institutions from within. The challenge in exposing this hidden war lies in its very nature. It's designed to be invisible. Cartels have evolved from violent street gangs into sophisticated transnational corporations with business models, supply chains, and marketing strategies. Many Americans resist acknowledging the scope because it contradicts the comfortable narrative that this is Mexico's problem, or something that only affects border states. There's also controversy around how discussing cartel influence might fuel xenophobia or oversimplify complex immigration issues. This introduction sets the foundation for everything that follows because it forces audiences to confront an uncomfortable truth. The war isn't coming to America. It's already here. It connects to every subsequent aspect of the story. The fentanyl crisis claiming over 100,000 American lives annually, the human trafficking networks, the money laundering operations in American banks, and the corrupted officials. By establishing that this is a hidden war, we prepare viewers to see their own communities differently and understand that the stories they're about to hear aren't distant tragedies, but urgent warnings about a threat operating in plain sight. The script content. The Mexican cartel's infiltration into American communities represents one of the most devastating yet underreported crises facing the nation today. These criminal organizations have evolved far beyond border smuggling operations into sophisticated networks that embed themselves within American neighborhoods, schools, and social structures. Their influence extends from major metropolitan areas to small rural towns, creating a ripple effect of violence, addiction, and economic devastation that touches millions of American families. The significance of this issue lies in its pervasive yet often invisible nature. Unlike traditional organized crime that concentrated in specific regions, cartel operations now reach virtually every state, using American citizens as distributors, money launderers, and enforcers. The opioid epidemic, which has claimed over 500,000 American lives in the past 2 decades, is largely fueled by cartel-produced fentanyl. Families in Ohio, West Virginia, and New Hampshire have watched their communities crumble as cartel drugs flood local markets. Consider Maria, a mother from Phoenix, whose teenage son was recruited by cartel associates at his high school to deliver packages for $500 a week. Within months, he was trapped in a cycle of violence that ended with his murder when he tried to leave. Similarly, in rural Georgia, entire farming communities have become unwitting hosts to cartel marijuana operations on secluded properties, bringing shootouts and intimidation to areas that previously knew little violent crime. Law enforcement experts estimate cartels generate $19 to $29 billion annually from the U.S. drug market alone, money that funds corruption, weapons purchases, and expansion. However, some argue that failed American drug policies and demand-side issues deserve equal scrutiny, suggesting that cartel power exists because of American consumption patterns and prohibition approaches. Critics also debate whether increased militarization at the border addresses root causes or merely shifts trafficking routes. Some community advocates emphasize that treating addiction as a health crisis rather than a criminal issue would reduce cartel profits more effectively than enforcement alone. This cartel influence directly connects to immigration pressures, as violence in Mexico drives asylum seekers northward. Border security debates, public health crises, and even American foreign policy decisions. Understanding the human cost, the families destroyed, communities destabilized, and lives lost is essential to grasping why this threat demands comprehensive, multifaceted solutions beyond simplistic political soundbites. The modern Mexican cartel infrastructure operates as a sophisticated transnational criminal corporation with revenues estimated between $19 to $29 billion annually, rivaling legitimate multinational businesses. These organizations have evolved far beyond simple drug trafficking rings into diversified criminal enterprises, controlling everything from manufacturing and distribution networks to money laundering operations spanning dozens of countries. Their structure mirrors corporate hierarchies with CEOs, regional managers, financial officers, and specialized departments handling logistics, security, enforcement, and corruption. The Sinaloa cartel alone operates in over 50 countries, demonstrating reach that exceeds many legitimate global corporations. Understanding this structure is crucial because it explains how cartels maintain their devastating grip on communities both in Mexico and throughout the United States. Their influence doesn't stop at the border, but extends deep into American cities through distribution cells, money operations, and corruption networks that have infiltrated law enforcement, banking, and political institutions. Consider the case of Chicago, where the DEA identified cartel operatives in every major neighborhood by 2018. Maria Gonzalez, a mother from Pilsen, watched her 16-year-old son recruited as a lookout, eventually becoming addicted to the same fentanyl he was paid to distribute. She describes cartel representatives as appearing like legitimate businessmen who integrated seamlessly into the community. Similarly, in rural Appalachia, former DEA agent Don Thornhill documented how Jalisco New Generation Cartel established distribution networks by exploiting existing opioid addiction crises, deliberately targeting vulnerable populations with highly addictive products. However, some analysts argue that focusing solely on cartels oversimplifies the problem, pointing to American demand, gun trafficking southward, and failed prohibition policies as equally responsible factors. Critics suggest the cartel empire narrative sometimes serves political agendas while ignoring systemic issues driving the drug trade. This organizational sophistication directly connects to every aspect of cartel impact. Their ability to corrupt officials enables operations. Their financial networks allow them to weaponize economics in communities, and their enforcement arms create the violence that terrorizes populations. The cross-border reach means American communities face the same intimidation tactics used in Mexico: surveillance, threats against families, and brutal retaliation. Understanding the cartel structure reveals why individual arrests rarely disrupt operations. These are resilient organizations with succession plans, redundant systems, and the resources to adapt quickly to law enforcement pressure. The devastating human cost of cartel violence on American communities. The Mexican cartel's influence extends far beyond border headlines, creating a ripple effect of destruction that touches countless American families through addiction, violence, and loss. This impact manifests most acutely in the opioid crisis, where cartels have become the primary suppliers of fentanyl flooding American streets. Unlike the distant drug wars portrayed in media, this crisis reaches into suburban neighborhoods, rural towns, and major cities alike, destroying lives regardless of socioeconomic status or geography. The significance of understanding this human dimension cannot be overstated. While statistics show over 100,000 overdose deaths annually in the United States, each number represents a mother's child, a parent lost, or a sibling who never came home. These aren't abstract casualties of a foreign conflict. They're American citizens whose lives intersect with cartel operations through the drug supply chain. Consider the story of Jeff and Deb, parents from Ohio, who lost their 22-year-old son to a fentanyl-laced pill he believed was prescription medication. Their experience mirrors thousands of others, a young person seeking pain relief or recreation, unknowingly consuming a substance manufactured in cartel labs with lethal inconsistency. Similarly, border communities like those in Arizona and Texas face daily realities of human trafficking, where cartels exploit vulnerable migrants, turning American soil into transit routes for their operations. The challenge in addressing this issue lies partly in the invisibility of the supply chain. Many Americans don't connect their local overdose crisis to international criminal organizations, viewing it instead as solely a domestic policy failure. There's also controversy surrounding how much emphasis to place on supply-side enforcement versus demand reduction and treatment approaches. This human cost directly influences other aspects of cartel impact, including the strain on healthcare systems, law enforcement resources, and community stability. When a town loses multiple young people to overdoses, it affects local economies, increases foster care needs, and creates generational trauma. The cartel's business model depends on this American demand, making every affected community an unwitting participant in sustaining these criminal enterprises. Understanding these personal stories transforms the cartel problem from abstract geopolitical concern into an immediate American tragedy demanding comprehensive response.